WISC-TV now presents For the Record.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to For the Record. I'm Mark Koehn, filling in today for Neil Heinen. And today we are talking with the two candidates running for Wisconsin State Superintendent of Public Instruction in the spring election this coming Tuesday, April 4th. Tony Evers is the incumbent. He's running for his third term, while Dr. Lowell Holtz has been superintendent for the Beloit, Whitnall, and Palmyra Eagles school districts. He is running against Dr. Evers, and we begin today with Dr. Evers. I guess I can call you Tony, right?
Tony's great, Mark.
Thanks for being with us this morning. Why are you running for a third term?
Well, first of all, I think we've had some good success over the last 8 years, and a lot of momentum going forward, a lot of things we want yet to accomplish. And frankly, I love being the chief advocate for 860,000 kids across the state. I think it's the best job in the world. I still love it, and we have a lot yet to accomplish.
Like what?
Well, a couple of things. One is we have to make sure we have adequate resources for our schools, and that includes all schools in Wisconsin. We've been kind of put on the back shelf for several years, and I think there's some good trajectory there. The other thing that we need to work on is a whole issue of a teacher shortage. We call it a looming shortage, but in some parts of the state it's real, and that has to be resolved. And the third thing that is really important for me and our kids is 1 in 5 of our kids struggle with mental health issues, and so we're going to be focusing on that, and we have money in the budget for that, and the governor is supportive, and I was with Joint Finance Committee last night and just recently, and they were supportive of it.
That's been long overlooked, the mental health issue.
Oh, absolutely, and you know, a small example of this is many of the school districts do this youth risk behavior survey, and every year, and this is a Fox Valley School District, nice, you know, suburban school district. 28% of their kids indicated on that they contemplated suicide.
28%?
Yes, and that you know, of course, those numbers decline as far as how many actually go through with it. But the fact of the matter is, if there's that level of concern on our kids' part, we have to react to it. We got to respond to that.
What are you most proud of over the last 8 years?
Well, we've done a lot of things that are good. Suspensions are down in the state. Expulsions are down in the state. 90% of our school districts are meeting expectations on our report card. But one thing that stands out to me, and it's been a good collaborative effort, is this whole issue of dual enrollment. And I know that's kind of weedy for kind of a general discussion, but basically there's thousands of kids every year that get high school credit and college credit at the same time. And we've been working with the technical college system and the university system to make that happen. And we've doubled the number in the last 5 years. And that works well for kids that are going to college or technical college afterwards for 2 years. It reduces their debt right off the bat and gets them on a good trajectory for a degree.
There's been some fiscal challenges over this period of time, too, with the state budget, funding the schools.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something we're going to continue working on. As I mentioned, I was with the Joint Finance Committee recently. And the good news is that my budget, I had asked for $700 million in my budget. And the governor has kind of picked up on that, and his proposal is around $650 million. And so we're in the right trajectory. We have people in position of power to make things happen. But I'll tell you what the reason we're in that position now is locally, people all across the state are standing up for their public schools in a referendum in Madison last November. And people are saying, if the state's not going to stand up, we are going to stand up. 600,000 people over the last 2 general elections have supported raising taxes on themselves to make their public schools strong. That is a strong message to people that are running for office. And that's why I think we've seen a change of heart. I think we're going to have some good trajectory going forward.
4 bills were just introduced this week to restrict school districts' ability to have those referendums.
Isn't that ironic? The idea that for years people are saying, well, politicians have been saying, we can't do much here at the state level, so you have the referendum. And now they're passing them with great clarity and great numbers and great percentages, and suddenly there's a handful of politicians saying, whoa, we can't do that. Well, we can't have it. You can't have it both ways.
Why can't you do it?
Why can't?
Why are the lawmakers saying that, do you think?
Because they're fearful that local districts are going to spend more than they want them to spend. That's the bottom line. my concern around that, I think referendums are great. I think people are standing up for their kids and telling people in Madison, you got to give us more. But the problem is we can't rely on referendums. We're going to have a state of haves and have-nots, those that can pass referendums and those that can't. And that's frankly inequitable, and we can't stand that as a state. So that's why I'm really jazzed about the fact that we're at the state level, at least with some of the politicians, and many of them I suggest, are looking, we're going to increase funding for our schools this next time around, and I'm going to advocate for that full time.
Your old district, Verona, has a huge referendum coming up on Tuesday.
Yes, well, they are a growing district, and they have significant needs, and you know, having the epic payoff on the TIF district there is helping to mitigate that. But when you're in a position of growth, you have to meet the needs of kids. As simple as that, and I'm sure the people in Verona are going to do the right thing.
Education is, some say, coming under attack from Washington, D.C. now with the new Secretary of Education.
That's an understatement, Mark.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one thing that separates me from my opponent, is that he embraces a lot of what Mr. Trump and Ms. DeVos are doing. But they've come out against after-school programs. They've wiped out that. They want to wipe that out. They want to wipe out teacher professional development money. They want to wipe out some grants for scholarships for needy kids. It's all within, you know, public radio, public TV, you name it, things that really give us a good quality of life in general, but direct attacks on our schools. My concern, Mark, is that everybody says, well, Congress will never do that. And maybe that's true, but this is the first public policy educational thing that the president and this secretary put forward, and frankly, it's a disaster. And I will be talking about this as much as I can, and I know others will too.
All right, and we will talk more about this race coming up in just a second. We'll have a quick commercial and be right back.
Thanks.
Welcome back to For the Record. We are talking with current State Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Tony Evers, running for his third term in the election coming up on Tuesday. You have a campaign ad running.
Yes.
Criticizing your opponent.
Yes.
Let's talk about it.
Sure. Well, first of all, there are some positive things going on that I talk about, but I am concerned that this race is somewhat about integrity. And my opponent in the primary did some things that I find, and I think most people in Wisconsin find objectionable, when he tried to cut a deal with the other candidate that didn't win the primary around the issue of, well, if you get out, give you a $150,000 job and a chauffeur, blah, blah, blah. And all that is kind of comedy, but to be honest with you, I view that as an issue of integrity, because they also talked about, well, let's take a look at the 5 most popular school districts in the state: Madison, Milwaukee, Green Bay, Kenosha, Racine. And if things get difficult with underachievement, instead of going in to be supportive, let's get rid of the school board. Let's take those underperforming schools and make them into charter or choice schools. And frankly, that's just not the way public policy should be done in this office. And so I point that out in a fashion that I think is reasonable. But that is integrity is important in this office. It's a constitutional office. And I've run against very conservative Republicans in the past, and not once have I had to challenge their integrity. Integrity is important to me, and I think their shenanigans pre-primary was really inappropriate and not the way public policy should be done.
This is a nonpartisan race, but it is.
Well, it always is. But I will tell you, Mark, the last 2 times I've won 69 out of 72 counties in the primary. Low turnout, but for sure, 70 of 72 counties. So there are some Republicans supporting me. I've lived all across the state, worked with Republicans. I plan to have good support in a nonpartisan way.
One of the criticisms your opponent's going to raise is the bureaucracy in the department and how difficult it is for out-of-state teachers to get certified to teacher, even if they're very qualified.
Yeah.
How can we cut that red tape?
Well, we have cut that red tape. Legislature passed regulations this year, but previously, that once if a teacher is successfully licensed in another state, has successful experience, we can get them into the system quicker. And that's really important. And the small issue, we have to make sure that spouses of military folks that move in and out of our state, that our teachers, we have to make sure we get them in the classroom if that's possible too, because they've had good experience, good life experience, and we want to make sure that's happening. So I reject that argument. Frankly, the law is the law, and the law allows us to be much more flexible.
We have about a minute left if you'd like to talk to your constituents about why they should vote for you.
Absolutely. My pitch is this. We have an extraordinarily successful school system in the state of Wisconsin. We have high graduation rates, lots of success in advanced placement. Our ACT scores are good. So there are things in a good place. I also have to admit that we have to close achievement gaps in the state. In Madison and other places, they're unacceptable. But we are being supportive of the school districts and the people that are in those school districts, putting together programs that will close those achievement gaps. We have to build on our success, and I believe I'm absolutely the most qualified candidate, but the one that really understands the needs of the kids in the state.
Best of luck next Tuesday. Dr. Tony Evers, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you,
on
Mark.
For the Record, have a great day. Up next on For the Record, his opponent for State Superintendent, Dr. Lowell Holtz. We'll be right back. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Mark Koehn, filling in for Neil Heinen, and we continue our conversations now with the candidates for State Superintendent of Schools. We just talked with current head of DPI, and now we're joined by his opponent, Dr. Lowell Holtz. Thanks for being with us today on For the Record.
Thanks, Mark.
Why do you want this job?
Because I'm very dedicated to serving kids, and I think this position has a lot of potential positive impact on the lives of children in Wisconsin.
How can you achieve that?
By focusing on what's best for the kids rather than what's best for the department. You need to look at where are kids being successful and where are we failing our kids. And there's many areas where we're failing our kids terribly. If we've been identified as the worst state in the nation when it comes to graduation gaps, that means you can name any state and Wisconsin's worse. And then when it comes to achievement gaps, for 2 consecutive years, we were the worst state in the nation. And then you bring in the fact that we are also the highest, we have the highest incarceration rate for African American males in the country. There's a definite correlation. It's not a coincidence. And so we've been failing generations of children simply because of the color of their skin, and that's the problem. We're talking about how great we're doing with our white kids, but we're turning our back on our minorities, our Hispanic and African American kids. And when we only have, in Madison, 54% of our kids that are African American graduating, and Milwaukee's at 56%. The school district where I came from in Beloit actually had been worse, but after we put a system in place where the kids could be successful, our African American population was graduating at almost a high 88% rate. So it can be done. It's not a losing battle. It's something that you have to put your nose to the grindstone and be dedicated to those kids, because the kids don't care if you're conservative or liberal. They care if you love them or not. And you need to get those teachers time to do what they do best, which is teach, and we can turn around failing districts. Because if we keep turning our back on minority kids in particular, that makes the department like the very epitome of institutionalized racism. You can't brag on one set of kids and then fail the other and not do anything to help.
Specifically, how do you fix it?
Well, I think you need to go from being a regulatory agency to being a supporting agency. So you want to provide support to the schools that are struggling. The innovation zone concept that's been so successful in Tennessee. You can share ideas with the parents, share ideas with the community. Those support teams, you have an external team that works with the community, the parents, the businesses, and then you have an internal team that talks about how do you increase safety in the school, how do you increase discipline and raise the expectations, the climate and the culture, how do you improve those? Because kids will rise to the level of our expectations, but they'll also sink to the level of our expectations. And I believe your station did a great reporting job on why they interviewed kids, why they were They felt that they were failing at such a rate, and they said their expectations, if a black kid took a advanced trigonometry class, people were wondering why they were there. So you have to change that culture. That it's hurting our kids and it's hurting their future, because it tends to, if you can't educate somebody, the poverty rate keeps going up. We have 7,000 kids drop out every single year in Wisconsin. That's across the state, and it costs us over $503 million additional for those 7,000 kids. That's a cost that we should be putting back into the classroom. If we could come up with programs that the kids would be interested in, if we could provide safe schools that the parents would send their kids to, there are so many things we could do to be much more successful with our kids all across the state of Wisconsin.
That was one of your number one priorities, was making schools safer.
Oh, absolutely. Because it's, if you have a dozen fights in a school, and we do have schools, high schools, that'll have a dozen fights a day, that's not an environment that's conducive to learning. Kids are nervous then, they're thinking about what's going to happen next. In the classroom, there's disruptions. When you talk to the teachers, they'll tell you that the support they're getting when they send a child out, the child's being sent right back. The checklists that the teachers have to do now for educator effectiveness and the Common Core requirements include a lot of data points that is stealing teachers' time away from kids in the classroom. We need to do a better job giving our teachers the power to do what they do best, which is teach. When I talked to Milwaukee middle school teachers, they told me they spend over an hour every day inputting data, over an hour, which is time that, I said, was it that way 10 years ago? No, it was time they used to spend planning for the next day, saying what were the results of the informal assessments they did throughout the day with the kids, who was struggling, what could they do to adapt what they were going to do the next day. That's been taken away from them. And you can give that back. We did it in a large urban district with 2,400 kids in the high school. We told them that if they would do bell-to-bell teaching, I would have an administrator walk through their classroom every single period of the day, so that if a child had their head down on the desk and they didn't feel comfortable confronting them, they didn't have to. They could simply do what they do best, which is teach. And that administrator, when they came through, would address the problem.
So you want to do it with Common Core?
Well, that's a good point to make, but yes, I would, because even the largest teachers unions in the United States, like the Chicago Teachers Union, they're adamantly opposed to it because they know it takes time away from the classroom for their teachers. And there's checklist after checklist after checklist, and that's not what teaching is about. Remember back when we were in school, it's that relationship. It's, the teachers want to develop that relationship with the kids where the teachers demonstrate respect, but then also receive the respect from the students. It's no wonder we're losing teachers from the profession. We're losing our best teachers because they're frustrated. And we can address that teacher shortage by making it a profession that is respected again. And when kids see teachers having fun, especially in the high school, then the high school kids are going, I think I'd like to be a teacher too.
We will continue our conversation with Dr. Holtz right after the break. Stay with us.
Thanks, Mark.
Welcome back to For the Record. We're continuing our conversation with Dr. Lowell Holtz, the candidate for State Superintendent of Schools. Your opponent, Dr. Evers, was on just a few minutes ago talking about his ad, criticizing you and the alleged offer you made to your opponent in the primary to offer him a $150,000 job and a driver if he would drop out of the race. How do you respond to that?
False accusations hurt, and it hurt the campaign. And if I was running, that was a last desperate act of someone who realized they were not going to have enough voters, and they wanted to divert attention from what they were doing, and the best way to do that would be to attack me. It's false information. The Wisconsin Elections Commission looked at it and said, there's nothing here, and they unanimously threw it out. So I'd like to focus on the issues for our kids rather than something like that. And if I was running on the issue of being the superintendent when we went to be the worst in the nation, I would kind of emphasize everything I could find that would divert people from your record. And he doesn't have a record that's positive. When the national assessment says only 40% of our kids across the entire state of Wisconsin are proficient in reading at 4th and 8th grade and are proficient at math at 4th and 8th grade. Less than 40% of our kids. That's atrocious, And then when you throw in the low percentages for our minority kids, and it basically goes against all human decency. If you love children, you have to do something where you're not forcing a parent of a 4-year-old to send their child to a school where they know very well that after 10 years, when they leave 8th grade, 0% of those kids in that school are proficient in reading and 0% are proficient in math. That's criminal.
But you're a big proponent also of charter and private schools.
My dad was, when he returned to the city of Milwaukee, he had been a police officer, came back as an inner city pastor after he went to the seminary. And he had one of the first voucher schools in Milwaukee. And I was a public school principal at the time. And he said, you know, you need to come down and visit and see what this looks like. And I saw the excitement back in the kids' faces. I saw the parents being excited and committed. And so I think, you know, and after that, I called the former MPS superintendent, Dr. Howard Fuller, and said, you were an MPS superintendent. Why would you support vouchers? And he said, from his perspective, in Milwaukee, you have some of the best schools in the nation because they have that tier system where they can pick the kids, and you have some of the worst schools in the nation. And he said, from his perspective, it's a civil rights issue because he doesn't want to force any parent to send a kid to a failing school. Now, the issue is there will never be enough voucher and charter schools to meet the needs of the failing schools. We need to do a much, much better job with our public community schools. If we do that, then the issue of charters and vouchers aren't, I mean, you don't have to be afraid of competition. If you're a successful school, then the only reason a parent would send their kid to a Lutheran school or a Catholic school is because they want a Lutheran or Catholic education, not because they're afraid of your school. We need to give them all those options back.
We have less than a minute to go. If you'd like to address the constituents and why they deserve your vote. You deserve their vote is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I'm very committed to the kids in Wisconsin, and I've dedicated my life to it. I've spent the last 30 years in education. I've been a Wisconsin Principal of the Year. I've turned around large failing urban districts, and our kids deserve better than what they're getting now. We know what they've had for the last 8 years. They can't afford it for another 4 years. So I ask for your vote on April 4th, Dr. Lowell Holtz, and if you need additional information, go to that website. Actually, you can get out and vote today if you want, but make sure you get out and vote and bring friends with you.
Best of luck to you on Tuesday.
Thanks, Mark.
Dr. Holtz, thanks for being with us today. And thanks to both of our guests for being with us. A reminder, the election is this coming Tuesday, April 4th. You've heard the candidates. Make up your mind. Now get out and vote. That's our time now. For the record, enjoy the rest of your Sunday.